How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? What's the real truth about Citizen Kane?
It'll probably turn out to be a very simple thing.
Hello, everybody. We hope you're doing well. I'm Parker.
And I'm Max.
And welcome to Better Than Citizen Kane, the highly subjective show where we take a look at a movie and ask the question, is it better than Citizen Kane?
If you like Citizen Kane, that's fine, because we're not here to hate on it.
But when every movie ever made is a reasonable contender for the title of greatest film of all time, you have to wonder, better than Citizen Kane?
So everybody, get out of your sleeping pods and prepare to investigate the air vents. But remember, no one in space can hear you scream, because today we're looking at Alien, 1979.
Very nice.
Thank
Very good.
you, Parker.
Good
Thank
stuff.
You very
Good
much.
stuff.
Parker, that's all from me.
Okay, great. So you're out for the episode then?
Yeah.
All right, okay. That's fair. Understandable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Alien.
Alien!
I hadn't seen this before.
Yeah, I've
That's
been
a
looking
correction.
forward to
I'd
this
seen
one.
the first 10 or 15 minutes before,
Sure.
and then fell asleep.
Yeah.
I was 14 and it was late, and my dad was just like...
And you
"Turn
hated
it-"
movies.
Yeah, I hated movies at the time, as we know. I didn't like movies until I was 20.
Yep.
And I watched a movie. And I was like, wow!
Whoa,
I'd
what
seen
is
movies
this?
before, but I never watched them. I should have been inversed. Anyway, yeah, I'd seen the first 10 or 15 minutes of this, and I fell asleep when I was 14. It was late at night. My dad turned it on and was like, you gotta see Alien. And I was like, yeah. And then I was like, honk shoe.
Honk
like
shoe.
Immediately.
An eepy guy.
Yeah, I was like, me, and such.
In space,
But,
no one can hear you honk shoe.
well, in fairness, he turned it on when I had already put on my long nightgown and little cap and was holding
Oh,
it.
that's
I'd already
tough.
blown out my candle.
That's okay.
So-
All right, you get a pass for that. I mean, what were you
well,
expecting?
this is what I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anyway.
So I hadn't seen this before, and I watched it, and it was great. Parker?
Yeah. So I had heard about this movie for a long time. The first time I ever encountered Alien was during my younger years Star Wars obsession, watching all those bonus features. They had a featurette about like the influence of Star Wars on other films, and they had a little segment about Alien. And granted, this is playing with like the PG, Star Wars releases of the original trilogy, and so they kept a lot of like the really intense clips out. But like I distinctly remember the shot of the three astronauts like on the elevator, but like the doors open and when they're on the planet, and like
Yeah.
all of that crap is flying around. There's like that siren light above them that's yellow. Like they showed that shot, and they showed a couple others later in the movie. Nothing with the alien, but specifically like the way the ship was designed.
Okay.
With like a clip of Ridley Scott talking about like, yeah, Star Wars like had this really lived-in griminess that like we wanted to bring into Alien, because something that I had to learn as I started studying movies more is that like the chronology of the way we think about movies is very rarely accurate, because we're not taking into account the time that this movie is being developed. So you look at film history like, well, Star Wars is 77 and Alien is 79. Like, of course, this is influenced by that. But pre-production of this started ages before Star Wars came out, right? And so then once it comes out, they can kind of shift gears as the production's happening. But that was my first interaction with Alien. And then I didn't finally watch it until my freshman year of college. It was just one of those days, like after class, where I had like an afternoon class and no plans for the evening. And I, much like Max, was frequently in the library to find stuff to watch, and I had grabbed Alien, and I was like, I should watch Alien. So I watched Alien for the first time at like 4 in the afternoon in like September or something. But I was just like, oh my God, like, whoa, that was really great. And I've just loved it ever since. Like I really enjoyed it the first time, and it's just subsequently grown on me. The more I've learned about it, the more I've watched it. And it's my favorite horror movie. Yeah. I think that's definitively where it lands for me. It's I don't know, it's a perfect haunted house movie, I think. It works really well for me in a lot of regards in that space. But that's kind of my history with the movie.
It's great. Well, and also you got to see it in theaters in 2022.
Yeah, I did.
With like a packed theater, because it was sold out.
Yep.
It was unavailable.
I know. I genuinely, like, more than anything, and I know that it's like jokingly a sore spot, but I do genuinely feel bad how often it comes up, just because I know you would have like
it's
loved
fine.
to be
I don't
there.
care. I literally couldn't be there.
Yeah, I know.
So it's fine.
But every time I bring it up, Max is like, yeah, Parker, I know. One of the greatest experiences ever.
Yeah,
Great,
Parker's
cool.
like, yeah, I wish you could have been there. And I'm like, yeah, I know. No, it's fine. Because we have since gone to showings.
We have, yes.
Not of Alien.
But that was a very... Thank you for bringing that up, because that was a very cool experience, because I saw it at the Broadway Theater in Salt Lake, which is run by the Salt Lake Film Society. And
support local theaters.
Support local theaters. And that space, it's not like... It definitely isn't a megaplex.
No, there's no luxury seating. It's still like the kind of the stadium seating. Yeah.
Yeah, smaller auditoriums, all those things. But like, so I'm watching this in a room with, I don't know, how many... It's like 200 seats in one of those theaters,
yeah.
right?
Like 170 to 200.
Yeah, and so I'm in a theater with like 200 other people. It's packed. It's sold out. And again, I'd seen this movie. I'd loved this movie. But as I'm watching it and like watching it with an audience in that space, something just clicked for me where I suddenly like completely crystallized and understood like this late 70s, early 80s boom of blockbuster. Because I'm like, this is how people were seeing these things.
Yeah.
People were seeing them in crowded, cramped theaters like this. You're shoulder to shoulder with people and you're all having this experience like in this space particularly.
Yeah.
It was, I don't know, there's something magical about it. It was really, really engaging.
Which I think is an interesting point because obviously for this podcast, we aren't watching the movies in their original context.
Sure.
For a long time, it was impossible to watch movies in their original context.
Yeah.
And now it's still pretty difficult unless you're going to like Fathom event showings, local theater showings, that sort of thing. And even then, it's like you're still not usually seeing it with a sold out theater.
Right.
We've been to a few this year, and like maybe even just like the one we went to last night was maybe the closest I've seen it to like fully packed.
Probably.
Maybe the one before that. But you know, we've seen some stuff. But like seeing these in that way and like how they were originally created to be seen is fascinating. Because there was no concept in 79 of like watching at home.
Yeah.
Right? Because there weren't even VHS tapes then, were there?
No.
No.
Yeah, it came later.
Yeah. Some movie was like exclusively made for theaters. Alien was. And so that's really great that you got to do that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't. I saw it at Parker's.
Yeah.
But he has a big projector, so it worked out.
We'll get into it as we kind of go through the summary, but like I would love to know just like knee-jerk reaction, first thoughts on the movie.
Well, first I want to say, I didn't talk about my experience in first encountering Alien, because obviously I saw it for the first time this last week, but I had seen Prometheus before, because it came out at a time that my dad was like, you gotta, like, I think my dad was like, I want you to come see movies with me.
Sure.
And I don't think I went to theaters because it was too scary.
Yeah.
And also I was 10, or however old I was. But we watched it at home. So I've seen Prometheus before this. And I'd seen some clips, obviously, because when you go to film school, even just when you were 13-year-old Max in the computer room at his parents' house looking at everything on YouTube, and you were interested in movies,
Sure.
you see a lot.
Yeah.
So going into this, I was like, I've seen the chest burster scene. I've seen parts of this. And yet, in the actual action of watching the movie, I had, like... I don't know, I do this trick. I don't know if other glasses users do this. I got to recommend it to y'all if you have a hard time with horror movies sometimes.
It's a good trick.
Oftentimes, it's scary and you're feeling really tense and you kind of want to look away, but you don't want to miss anything. So it's like that classic, like, peeking through the fingers thing, right? Which I did do in Alien.
Yes.
I was doing that during the chestburster scene, and then I was like, I've seen this. I know what happens. Why am I so afraid? But that's a testament to how effective it is, but also, here's my trick. If you want to see it, but you don't want to see the whole thing, you just lift your glasses up. And then it's blurry. You're censoring it for yourself. And I highly recommend that. But yeah, anyway. So this movie really worked. Because in the action of actually watching the movie, obviously, it's not like I went into this going, I've seen it all. But like, movies work for a reason.
Yeah.
There's a reason movies are made in the way that they are. And it's so that a scene that you've seen 1,000 times before, you've seen the parody in Spaceballs. When that scene comes up, you are afraid.
Yeah.
Even though you know what's going to happen. So anyway.
Yeah. And it's...
That's my takeaway. No, I mean, other things. I know what the alien looks like. I was really interested that this... Obviously, I knew that they hid this a lot of the time because you want to hide the suit. You want to keep it in the shadows, obviously. But like... There are very few actual understandable shots of the alien for most of this until like right at the end. It's hard to get an idea of what its shape is.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the time it's a close-up of just its mouths or like towards the end, like the reveal, like the head. You get a sense of the head
and like a bit of the torso.
But you don't get a
You don't get a full
like,
body.
And like there's like the tail. But it's just really interesting that it's like piecing it together for you, but you don't see the whole thing like ever.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating.
Yeah, I do like that aspect a lot. Especially considering like where the franchise has gone with just
Sure.
like, all right, look at it. Here it is.
Here it is. Which I still think it's a cool design.
I like the
and
design
I like
a lot.
to see it.
Yeah.
It did look a little bit silly spinning away into space at the end. I was like, that looks like a guy.
What was really funny about watching this with Max, and I don't know, I think this was like 50% genuine reaction and 50% diffusing tension after genuinely scary moments. So after almost every single scare, Max go, ha, kind of goofy looking though.
Really?
You did that.
I did that once.
You did that with the chest burster, and you did that with the air ducts.
That is true.
You're like,
I did.
Kind of silly.
Yeah, because and it's also kind of silly.
It is. It was just funny that was consistent.
When the chest bursters like scuttles across the table, it's really funny because it looks like they just have a magnet under it and just go whoop. And then when there's the jump scare in the air vents, it's doing little jazz hands. It's like which I thought was really funny. And obviously I jumped, but it was also very funny. And then at the end, it's just like
just bouncing around in space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good movie though.
Good movie.
Yeah. Did you get anything new out of this watch? Well, because you also, everyone that was there hadn't seen it before, except for you.
It was
you
just me.
You were in a group with like
all
four
fresh,
people.
Yeah, fresh faces.
That had never seen it before.
Yeah, that was fun. I really love. So something that I do every like Halloween season is I do like holiday movie nights with like horror movies or spooky movies that I love. And sometimes people have seen them, sometimes they haven't. And it's one of my favorite things, like watching movies that have like very specific moments in them, just to watch other people's reactions.
Yeah.
Of, we had a pretty decent sized group for when we watched The Thing.
Yes.
And there were a couple people there who hadn't seen it. And like there were just a couple times where like I would just lean forward and like be watching that row of people and just watch their jaws drop and just be like, oh my god.
Well, it's also fun watching a movie with someone you know hasn't seen it because you kind of start to see it again with new eyes where you're like, yeah, this is pretty nuts. Like, like it puts some surprise back into it. So
totally.
That's cool.
Yeah. So like I think as far as that experience goes for me, the one that like really stood out in a big way that hadn't before, and like it worked for me previously, but it's just I've seen this so many times that I think it wore off a little bit, and then seeing with new people, it kind of came back in of just the tension of Brett going off by himself when Harry Dean Stanton is searching for the cat.
Yeah.
Like I just watching everybody in the room just going, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Made me sound like a dumbass, Parker. The whole time I'm just going, no. Oh, that was silly though.
No, please,
no. Not looking at the screen. I was brave.
If anybody would like to know what watching movies with Max is like, it's that is exactly we piped in actual audio.
That was real
recorded.
audio of me watching Alien for the first time.
Yeah.
No, yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something else that stood out is like again having vague knowledge of this movie. Yeah, I think this will be another recap that's just kind of like it's Alien.
Yeah.
Most people have seen it. If you haven't seen it, you gotta check it out.
Gotta check it out.
But like in the scene when Ian Holm is revealed to be an android, it's very interesting. Like,
yeah.
Someone who was there, like next to me, was like, didn't get it until someone said he's an android, which happens like when they knock his head and
off.
it like rips up to the side.
Yeah.
Because like I remembered because I saw the milk sweat and I was like, I know from Prometheus, and I had forgotten I knew there was an android, I didn't know who it was.
Yeah.
Just really weird, intense scene.
Yeah, it is.
And really disturbing to see a milky guy just
guy,
flailing
man.
around trying to kill you is awful.
Well, it's funny that should be the case of like cluing it in, right? Because that line is so obviously an ADR dub.
It is.
Like it's completely off screen.
It is.
He's a robot.
Yeah.
Ash is a goddamn robot.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm sure they did a test screening and people were like, his head came off?
Yeah,
like,
also they don't really establish that there are androids in this universe.
yeah, they just leave that out. Yeah, so it's just, I think that's just funny that they put that in there. Just like, okay, we need to make sure.
But real good prosthetics on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was, I liked the milky robot. It was awful. Hated it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit of context that I know about the movie before we jump into our kind of overview of everything is I want to make sure that I'm getting names right as I'm going through talking about all of this.
For a second, I thought you were just pulling up IMDb trivia, and I was like, Parker.
Parker.
No, you're better than
You're
that.
better than this. No. So, The script is by Dan O'Bannon, with a story by Ronald Shusett.
Okay.
And they had collaborated to kind of come up with this idea, and Dan O'Bannon wrote the script. And what's interesting is that the script was written very much just as a full character piece without many details. So none of the characters were gendered, and none of them like were any specific race. It was just, okay, here's our crew of people, and then we will go as we're doing casting and as we're developing the script, like things will fall into place.
Yeah.
So a big part of the legacy of this movie is that it's kind of one of the first like female action hero kind of things. You get more of that in Aliens, obviously,
Yeah.
but like as far as sci-fi goes, like putting Sigourney Weaver front and center, it was kind of a big deal for 79.
I mean, it's interesting because we've watched a lot of slashers recently. And in this, Ripley is 100% a final girl, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Like, final girls usually end up kind of being an action hero. And she did a little more of like that kind of like running away scared thing, which is normal and I would do.
Sure.
I'm not knocking that. But like, I think that's an interesting point of like, obviously she goes on to become like this like paragon of like female action.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Love it. So I agree, but I also think she's very much also in this kind of final girl territory as well, which is interesting.
Yeah, and I think there's a good blending of that I like a lot.
Yeah,
and
a good blend.
And I think part of the strength, and this is, I'm saying this with like the biggest asterisk because some idiot out there is going to misconstrue what I'm trying to say, which is that 100% you can write dynamic, interesting, quote unquote, strong female characters. It's the easiest thing in the world. Like people do it all the time and they do it well. But I do think that a part of the strength of like Ripley as a character in this is that it manages to avoid a lot of those final girl trappings you would get from other horror movies.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah, because it wasn't written as a final girl.
Well, I was just thinking is like immediately I was like, oh, I want to take back what I said because it feels very different. And it's because it wasn't written with like, well, she's got to do this. She's going to do that. It's like, no, she's very much, it's just a good character.
Yeah.
It's a character reacting appropriately who was then cast as a woman.
Right.
Which is nice.
And I think that's more on my mind at the moment because Max and I just did a Friday the 13th double feature at the same theater last night.
Yeah.
Which neither of us had seen. We watched the first one.
1 and 3.
And 3. And those are kind of the worst version of final girl tropes.
Are. Exactly. Yeah.
And so just thinking about that and then thinking of like where Ripley comes from and like sits in that pantheon. I'm like, okay, I think that's a strength of it is that like as it goes on, she gets written more, specifically, obviously, the sequels are like, okay, Ripley is a female character. We're writing Ripley as a female character, and then we can do interesting things with that. But I think this first stepping stone works really well of avoiding so many of the cliches that existed before that because it wasn't intended that way.
Yeah, it feels like she has more agency than a lot of final girls do.
Totally.
It's like, okay, well, you're going to end up at the end, and then you're just going to mad dash
to
try and survive.
It's like Lambert is filling so much of that role in this movie.
True, yeah.
Like, Lambert is the stand... As far as, like, a female character who is unassuming, who isn't in a position of power compared to the rest of the crew.
Yeah.
Like, in any other horror movie, that would be the character.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah. But instead,
Yeah, I don't know.
Someone who's very capable, in a position of power, I think that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. The other thing that I think is kind of cool about all of this is that, and I say cool, this gets into some questions of like emotional ethics on sets a little bit, but this was, as I understand it, like one of, if not the first, like film credit for Sigourney Weaver. I think she'd done some commercial work, she'd done some theater work, but she was definitely the greenest one out of the group. And again, because this was kind of a pool of, we haven't gendered any of the roles yet, there was some contention among some of the other castmates who were more seasoned veterans that she gets the lead, that she is the standout character. And the director, Ridley Scott, chose to like really lean into that and amplify it to get a performance that he wanted out of Sigourney Weaver. And so what he would do was like specifically Yaphet Kotto, who plays Parker, he was naturally a little bit more combative with Sigourney. Like, and as I understand it, like, they're fine, they're friends, it's all good. But like on this first shoot, there was some of that tension, and what Ridley was telling him off camera was like, okay, like, lean into that, like, get her to stand her ground a little bit more. Specifically, I was watching an interview where they were talking about the scene after Dallas has been, taken in the air vents, and they've figured out that Ash is an android, and it's just the three of them. It's Lambert, Parker, and then, of course, Ripley. And so they're by themselves, and Ripley has to assume command, essentially. She has to come up with a plan, and Parker isn't happy about it, and he keeps pushing back on it.
Wasn't that earlier? I thought it was earlier because there were more people in the room. And is this where he's talking over her?
No, he does it a few times.
Oh,
there's
okay.
just this specific scene is
Sorry.
no, you're good. Is like, okay, what are we going to do? We're gonna grab our provisions. We're gonna get as much fuel as we can. We're gonna leave. Like
Right.
that's the
Yes.
plan.
Yeah.
Like that's what they end up on. But he's been doing it throughout the whole movie of like talking over her and all these things.
Yeah.
But like it's just the three of them left. And while they were filming this scene, he, as an actor, was very improvisational and would just kind of ad-lib things and add to it and kind of draw from their natural antagonism offset, to the point that, like, there were a few takes where he would just be getting up in her face. He's like, you're the captain? That's ridiculous. Like, look at me. I need to be the captain. I'm the one in command. I'm the one in control. And they did like 4 or 5 takes of this. And finally, on the last one, Sigourney Weaver just snapped. And she just goes, I'm the captain. And Yaphet sits there for a minute and goes, okay.
Is that in the movie?
It's not in the movie.
Okay, I
It's
was like,
not.
I don't remember.
No,
this
it was just kind of like this moment on set of like, okay, now we can go on with the scene and we can do it this way. And like, now the power structures have been established. It's interesting.
I know what you're saying about emotional ethics.
Yeah. Like,
Don't love it.
I don't
there's
love
kind of a
it.
history of being mean to the woman on set.
Right,
To
exactly.
get a better performance out of her. But that is an interesting approach.
Yeah,
I'll
just
give
one of
you
those things of like, okay, and I think there's kind of a palpable sense of that tension in some of those scenes. Again, mileage may vary on the emotional ethics of it. Again, I am also of the opinion that I think there's a very long history of emotionally abusing female actors to get performances.
Surely they can't give a good performance without me abusing them.
No, crazy, right?
Yeah.
But in any case, so that's kind of some tidbits about the way this movie is put together. Obviously, H.R. Geiger is kind of the big stylistic thrust of the xenomorph, and everything alien in the movie has a huge influence on like alien design going forward.
Yep. Meanwhile, another designer was brought on to design like the Nostromo and like the human stuff too, right? So there's a distinct difference between alien architecture and that sort of thing, and the aesthetic versus like the Nostromo and the crew. And
Totally. So I think that's interesting. I think there's like, and again, as this was going on, the script had been tossed around for a while and was in development, hadn't officially been greenlit yet. It was originally picked up by Roger Corman's production company and would have just been a B movie.
Yeah.
Like that's where it was destined to be for a while. And then the script got handed around, ended up over at Fox, and reportedly the first drafts were not very good, but the chest burster scene was so grabbing that they're like, okay, there's something here.
Yeah.
Like that was, Dan O'Bannon talks about that of like, that was a big moment of realizing like, oh, that distinction of, well, what if the alien inseminates someone? Like what if it like impregnates someone with this facehugger thing going on? Gross, yuck.
I think that was what I said the most while watching. I just went, yuck. And I was like, not enough people in horror movies go, yuck. Especially with this, like seeing it on, John Hurt's face and just not being like, ew.
Nasty.
Ew, gross. Yeah. I'm going to let you do the recap.
Cool.
I'm going to let you.
All right,
I'll
great.
allow it.
So
that'd be
we open on a ship, a very massive ship. Basically, it just looks like an oil tanker, like in space.
But it also has like the vibes of like those oil kind of refinery plants that you see around.
And like the big tall spires, they talked about like being a refinery plant, but also they wanted it to look like a Gothic castle.
Very fun. Because it's the haunted house.
The haunted house. Like the pitch for this movie, like on paper, the log line that Dan O'Bannon talks about is that he's like, it's truckers in space in a haunted house.
Yeah.
That is the idea of this movie. And so we open on the ship Nostromo, which is carrying like, I think it's like 20 million tons of like refined, dark matter or something. There's some fuel that they have like a little text thing that pops up that tells you info about the ship or whatever. And it's drifting through space, and we start going through these corridors. And as the camera, I love the way the camera moves in this movie. I like the way that it just floats around and just kind of...
Because it's in space.
It's because it's space,
Because they shot it in space.
Right. Oh, geez, man, you're so right. Yeah, that's zero G.
Huge gaps in your knowledge.
Dude, oh, man. But I just like the opening of this movie is just the camera just like floating through these corridors. And as it goes, the environment almost reacts to the camera of like, you're going through these hallways and then lights are turning on. We end up in a cockpit where the first sort of like stand-in for a human being is just one of the helmets is sitting on the back of a chair, and then a display pops up and the computer comes to life, and like it frames the helmet as if it's a close-up on somebody, even though nobody's there, and you're like watching the face of the helmet with the reflection or whatever. Computer turns off, more of the lights in the ship pop up, camera drifts through, and we end up in this white room with these like pods all in like a star configuration. And the lights come on and they open up and you see that there are people inside.
Yeah.
They're all sleeping. And the first person that sits up is John Hurt.
Kane.
Yep.
Any relation?
Any relation to our man, the myth, the legend, Charlie?
Charles Foster?
Oh, well.
Maybe.
So he wakes up and the rest of the crew wakes up. So we've got Ripley, we've got Ash, we've got the Captain Dallas, Kane, Lambert, Parker and Brett.
Yes.
And Parker and Brett are kind of the below deck crew. Yeah. And everybody else is kind of not officers, but they have more like stations.
Yeah. Dallas is captain. Ripley's kind of second in charge. There's a pilot, maybe.
Yeah, I think Kane is pilot of some kind.
Lambert's communications.
Yeah, Lambert's communications. I think Ash is medical.
Yep.
And then Parker and Brett are like below deck.
Yeah.
So this is our crew, and they wake up and they're like, "Huh, that's weird. Long trip." And then they're like, "How far are we from home?" They're like, really far.
You're supposed to wake up as you're approaching Earth, right? It's been like a 10-month journey, or
something like that. Yeah.
Or maybe it was gonna. I don't know.
Something anyway. A long time. Like they've been out. I think 12 to 16 months or something.
Yeah. There's like a brief mystery of like, why have we woken up?
Yeah, because they're like, "Oh, we're can't wait to get home," and they're like, "Bad news. We're not home. I don't know where we are.
Yeah.
But we're like home's still a very far away." And they're like, "Well, why did we wake up? Why did Mother wake us up?"
So Dallas goes and communes with Mother,
which is the ship's computer.
And it just makes it sound like everyone are children, kind of. Yeah. They're just like,
I gotta go talk with Mother.
Did you talk to Mother about it? Mother says, and I'm like, all right.
Okay.
You're the captain, Dallas. Why are you listening to what your mother says? No, it's fine.
Yeah.
But it's fun. Yeah, they talk to the computer named Mother.
So Dallas goes and talks to the computer, and he comes back and he's like, "Hey, Mother woke us up because there was a weird anomaly. Like, we got a signal coming through. Yeah. And it doesn't mean anything. Like, it's just a series of, like, augmented tones being sent out, repeating." And they're like, "Well, why do we care? We're not explorers. We're not scientists. We're truckers. Like, we're oil rig workers." And it's pointed out that's like, hey, the contract you signed says that, like, if there is any sort of communication, we're obligated to investigate.
But also specifically with, like, intelligent life.
Yeah.
Like, potentially intelligent
life.
They're
like, this repeating pattern leads us to believe it could be something.
Yeah.
Other than just, static noise or whatever.
So they descend upon.
They go to the planet.
Horrible planet.
Is it LV-427, I think is what it's called. They don't call it that in this. It's stuff that all comes later in the franchise.
Cool.
It has a name. I'm sure the alien heads will be upset with me for not
planet.
doing the right one. Prometheus planet.
It's where Prometheus happened.
Is it the same planet?
I don't know. Yeah, it is. Because Prometheus ends with, like, the ship crashing, like the big donut ship crashing.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And the first alien is born.
Right. Okay. So we get on this planet, and they venture out. So first, it's, again, very interesting to me the way that it's kind of constructed, that the movie is sort of, if you haven't seen this before, if you're watching this in 79, you don't know anything. The movie is entirely framing as John Hurt as the main character.
It is.
He wakes up first. He is the one who, like, heroically is like, I volunteer. I'd like to go and figure out what's going on. Like, we're following his perspective for a lot of this. So
he's a good, almost like a Psycho kind of treatment, right? Of like, this is our main character. Oh,
Yep,
Something
exactly.
happened to him.
I think that works really well.
Yeah.
So Kane, Lambert, and Dallas head on out to the surface to try and investigate, and they see this gigantic donut ship.
With a bite out of it.
As a bite out of it. H.R. Geiger has discussed that the ship is designed to look like legs in stirrups, like giving birth. There's a lot of giving birth. There's a lot of psychosexual erotic imagery in all of these designs. That's kind of his thing.
They enter the ship through a kind of a canal of sorts.
Yes.
Yes.
Curious. So they go in, and inside, it's one of the coolest shots of the movie, is like the space jockey, is what they call him. So they come into this giant room, and the camera just keeps pulling back, and you see this enormous alien in like this chair in the center of the room that like goes up into like a central column. And to get the effect right, they had children in the spacesuits to like get the scale even grander, which is just so cool. It's just
really
fun.
Cool. And also, my first yuck of the movie.
Yep.
I went, yuck.
Yeah, because he's got like an elephant face. Like he's got, I don't know.
He's a big weird guy. Yeah.
Yeah. But they look at this guy and they're like, wow, this is a life form, or at least it was. He's like fossilized. And they take note of like, looks like something's like, his ribs are exploded outward.
Something exploded out of him.
Huh. Strange.
Anyway,
Weird.
Look at this hole over here.
Yeah, they find a hole. Kane goes down the hole, and like bungee jumps in essentially. And it opens up to this massive cavern, which we can imagine is like filled in like the outer rim of the donut shape, just around the whole ship. It's just huge. It's just this cavernous space. And he goes down there and he finds like in the ruts of the circle are just eggs. Dozens and dozens of these egg-like shapes that are huge and leathery and gross.
And he looks up at one close, because he kind of falls into one of the ruts. Falls in a rut.
He goes, there appears to be some thin layer of protection. Reacts whenever I break through it, and then immediately slips and falls into the fog.
Yeah.
It's just funny.
And he gets up close to an egg, and he sees something moving in there, and he's like, something's moving in here.
He's like, it looks like life. Organic life. Yeah. And then the egg reacts to him, and it opens up.
Like a flower.
Yep. And he leans his head over.
And a big gross thing jumps at him.
Yep.
Acids through his helmet.
And snags onto his face, and he falls over.
Cut to.
Supposedly, I think I should have like corroborated this. I'm fairly certain this is an urban legend.
Okay.
Supposedly, though, at that like shot where the facehugger comes at camera, there's like a frame of a vagina. I don't know if that's actually true.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
No clue. But supposedly.
Okay.
That
feels too on the nose, I reckon.
You would think, but also like so much of it, because again, another aspect of like what Dan O'Bannon and Ridley Scott have talked about is that like a part of this movie that was important to them was that they wanted to, like, the idea was supposed to be putting men in the position of like female victims of rape, where it's like, oh yeah, this is what happens.
Yeah.
And like, this is, they designed it to make, like, Ridley Scott has a quote where like, he wanted men in the audience to be crossing their legs at certain points. He wanted them to be deeply uncomfortable with what is happening to a male body on screen.
I like that.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
That's good.
I like that.
Yeah.
So, to that point, wouldn't surprise me if that frame isn't.
No.
But it does feel very on the nose.
So we go back to the ship.
Go back to the ship, and they're outside asking to be let back in. And and Ripley says, well, what happened? Like, what's going on?
He said, something's attached itself to Kane's face.
Yeah, there's some organism that's attached itself to Kane. He's going to die out here. And she said, wait a minute. If we break quarantine, all of us are at risk. We can't do that.
Yeah.
And Dallas is getting very angry. He's like, I'm the captain. I'm giving you an order. Like, open the door now. And she's like, I'm sorry. I can't do that. Yeah. Like, you know the rules. And then Ash, the medical officer, lets them in anyway.
Yeah.
He's like, opening the doors now.
Yeah.
And Ripley is very shocked by this and very confused. They bring him in. They take the helmet off. They do like a little laser cutter thing. I love the sound design of all these little like scientific instruments he has. They cut open his helmet, and you just get the first shot of the thing.
Bad.
It's
awful.
Just wrapped its way around its face.
Long, like, digits fingers.
Yeah, the fingers are
around
like
the back of the head, which is iconic now.
Yeah.
But again, seeing it in context of the movie, I'm just like, oh, God.
And like the first shot of it, you see it from the side, and then the tail wraps further around his neck. Like that's the first motion
and when they try
you see
to
from it.
Cut it off,
it tightens more, and it's like it's gonna kill him.
And it's gonna rip his face off too. They say.
Yeah.
Also, I hate that it's breathing. Like I hate that it moves up. Like it just feels alive in the worst way.
Yeah.
They do a scan, and they're like, "Whoa, it's providing him oxygen as it is putting." Do they really? They
said there's a tube down his throat giving him oxygen, and they're like, "That's strange. Why keep him alive?"
Right, and then Ripley later is like, "Why is have you figured something out?" Ash is like, "I'm what does he say?
Still
collating." Yeah.
And there's kind of an interesting throwaway line in the middle of that where the rest of the crew is outside the medbay watching this, and Parker keeps asking, he's like, "Why don't you freeze him? Why don't you put him in the pod and freeze him?"
Yeah.
Which then pays off later of like Ash's intentions and what the company wants and all that. But like there's that moment of like, because they talk about how it seems to be susceptible to differences in temperature. They talk about that later. So like freezing him probably would have been the easiest thing to do to save him. But again, Ash doesn't want to save him, right?
Yeah.
So he's got this thing on his face, and they don't know what to do about it.
They're all pretty worried.
They're all pretty worried. Tensions are high. Lambert is really angry at Ripley because she's like, "You were going to leave us out there to die." And she's like, "Quarantine. Like, somebody has to be responsible here."
Yeah.
I happened to watch this during 2020.
Yeah.
And just that whole
Didn't you also
subplot.
watch Jaws in 2020?
Yeah, I did.
What the hell, man?
I don't know.
Could have watched different movies.
Could have watched different movies. Instead of reminding myself about man's hubris in the face of trying to be responsible.
Wow.
But in any case, tensions are running high. And then it's one of those classic, "You should come take a look at this."
You gotta see this. And they're like, "Explain why." And he's like, "It's easier if you just come look." It's like, you could have said.
You could have just said.
You could have said, "It's gone."
Yeah. It's just gone.
But he didn't want to, maybe. Anyway, everyone gathers around.
They gather around.
And Ripley and Ash and Dallas are... They walk in, and the door to the medbay is open for way too long. And we all were like, "Close the door!" Like, what are you... And they're not wearing masks this time. No. Which I was like, wear a mask.
Wear a mask.
Wear a mask. And they're just kind of doing like Scooby-Doo stuff. They're just like looking around.
Yeah.
And then it falls from the ceiling and it's a jump scare, but it's kind of dead.
Yeah.
Right? It's done.
Yeah.
It's over. Whatever it was doing, it's done.
Yeah. And the Facehugger itself is dead. Like it's twitching, but he's like it's a reflex. Yeah, it's a reflex. It's dead.
It's dead. Kane is still asleep at this point?
Yeah, still asleep at this point. And they put it in the little scanner and like examining it.
Well, and they also cut it open.
They just flip it over.
Was that earlier that they cut it open though, and the acid goes?
Oh yes, thank you. Yeah. So when it's on his face first, Dallas is like, "I want it off him now."
Yeah. So
and Ash is like, "It could kill him." He's like, "I'll take that responsibility. Like, I want it off." So they go. He's like, "Okay, I'm gonna make an incision above like the knuckle of the digit," and they cut it. And it bleeds acid. And the acid goes through the floor and like through the layers of the ship, and they have to keep going down to stop it because like that crap's gonna eat through the hole and then depressurize and we're all dead.
But it eventually stops. It slows down and it stops.
It's gone through enough layers or whatever. And Parker has that comment where he's like, "It's a wonderful defense mechanism. Like, you don't dare kill it."
Yeah.
It causes even more problems when it bleeds.
Yeah. So later it's dead.
Yes.
And that's when they flip it over.
They flip it over and it's all like, I think it's like raw chicken mostly is how that puppet is made. Yeah. It just is fleshy and gross and
yeah.
Prodding around in this thing. And Ripley she's like, "Shoot this thing out into space. Like, shoot it out the airlock." And Ash is like, "This is intelligent life. This is the first time we found another organism. Like, we have to study this."
It's funny that you're saying all these things that Ash was doing, because now I'm like, yeah, he's fucking evil.
Yeah, but it comes...
But during the movie, I'm like... Guess I mean, you're just being a stubborn asshole about
it. The guise of him being like the science officer gives him so much leeway to be like the guy.
Okay,
it's like, no, like, this has to be studied. We have to run tests.
I'm just watching it going like, all right, this guy's just stubborn and like his curiosity will kill him.
Yeah,
I had not somehow gathered that this was the answer.
Right, but once you know,
now that I'm looking back, I'm like, blatantly obvious. Suspicious activities from this guy.
Yeah. He and Ripley argue about it. Dallas sides with Ash, and Ripley's upset about it, and they confront her in the hallway, where she's like, "What are you doing? Like, you're the captain. You should be, like, what what on earth is going on? And he's like, I'm doing exactly, like, we do what they tell us to do. He's like, you do what the company tells you to do. We all earn our paycheck and we move on. That's a big overhanging thing through all of this. Is like, the first thing when they wake up is Brett and Parker bring up an argument of saying, hey, we think we deserve full shares. Like, we wanted to discuss the bonus situation.
Yeah.
And, like, that whole idea of, like, corporations and money and the middleman and delegation is overhanging this entire movie in a big, big way. So they have their argument, and Dallas is like, I do what they tell me to do. You should do what they tell you to do. Let's just get this done and over with.
Yeah.
At this point, he's like, because all of this has been happening on their little, like, half shuttle. They haven't gone back to, like, the full ship yet. Mm-hmm. And he's like, just get us back to the ship, get us home, I'm done. So they take off, they get back into, like, the ship proper, which is huge.
Yep.
And as they're there, again, tensions are still kind of running high until yet another, you should really come see this.
You should come see this. You're not going to believe this.
They go down to the medical bay, and Kane is awake. And he seems to be fine.
Yeah, and then they say, like, what do you last remember? And he goes, I don't remember anything after...
He's like, some terrible dream about smothering.
Right.
Which is, that line.
Bad. Yeah, and then they're like, oh, well, he's fine.
Yeah, and they're like, okay, we're all going to go back to sleep.
Yeah,
we're
gonna
have one last meal together, and then we're all going back in the pod.
It's certainly weird that awful creature we know nothing about had its tail down his throat, but he's fine now.
He's fine. Ash checked him out.
Let's get him some food.
Mm-hmm.
They get him some food.
And
he's like, oh, I can't wait to have real food. Mm-hmm. Or whatever.
Yeah. And then
he goes, oh.
Something bad happens.
And then he starts...
Parker's like, well, the food's not that bad. And he just starts convulsing. Just having a seizure. And there's this whole bit of trying to hold him down. They're trying to, like, stick a spoon in his mouth.
Yeah.
He doesn't bite his tongue off or whatever. And, like, all of this is happening. It's escalating. And he's just screaming.
Yep.
Louder and louder and louder. And he'll suddenly... just this burst of blood through his white shirt.
First, just a burst of blood.
Mm-hmm. And everybody stops for a second.
Yeah.
And then he keeps convulsing. It keeps coming. Something is coming out of his chest. And then finally it just comes out. Sprays blood everywhere. The cast knew something was going to happen. They knew that they'd read the script. They're like, okay, something comes out of his chest. They hadn't seen the effect yet.
Yeah.
So all of those reactions, specifically... Veronica Cartwright?
Yeah.
Veronica Cartwright's like scream as it sprays her in the face and just like her
blood,
shudder.
Yeah.
Like that's all real because it just had no idea that was going to happen.
And an awful little monster.
Awful little dude with metal teeth. Have you ever noticed that? Like the very shiny metallic teeth.
Well, that's the thing is that the alien is very like kind of
engineered.
Bioengineered, which obviously Prometheus.
Oh yeah.
But like its tiniest mouth that we see later comes out. It's like a little white, like bone thing.
Yeah, it's
that looks
very bony.
really weird, and you're like, what even? Like,
yeah.
But when you see it in like light and stuff, obviously we know that it has like a bunch of valves, and like its side of its head looks very mechanical.
Right.
It's really cool.
I love the design of this thing.
Hey, hot take. The alien looks really cool.
Really cool. So
xenomorphs are cool.
This little guy comes out of his chest.
He looks around.
He looks around and he screams. Yeah. And he scuttles off.
He scuttles off in like a very silly effect. That's just very. It's good.
Sure.
But it's a little funny.
Yeah. And then everybody's just left in total shock at what just happened.
But they get their senses pretty quick.
Yeah.
They start grouping together to go hunting. Yeah.
They put, again, another shot that is unintentionally silly. They wrap Kane's body in a bag. And Dallas is like, does anyone want to say anything? And everybody's just so depressed and shocked that they don't say anything. They launch him out the airlock and his body just goes,
it
just like tumbles into space.
And then just like
shoots out like a torpedo.
We all laughed out loud.
Yeah.
It was very silly.
So now they're like, okay, we need to catch this thing, blast out the airlock. And
with like a cartoon net.
Yeah, they get
Parker has like a big cartoon net, which is so funny.
And they break into teams. So Ripley goes with Brett and Parker. And
Ash creates a detector to find.
Yeah, so he gets. He makes this little. He invents this little thing that picks up like changes in air density.
Yeah.
So that they can point it and like it'll beep when something is nearby. Yeah. Essentially, it's like a metal detector for movement.
Yeah.
So each group gets one. Ripley goes with Parker and Brett. Dallas goes with Ash and Lambert, and they split up in the ship to go find this thing.
Yeah.
And they're going through, and you're building tension because they've got their little thing, and it's beeping louder and louder. Okay, something's there. Like, it's in the locker.
Yep.
They open the locker, and Jones the cat, who we would not mention because he hasn't really shown up yet.
No.
There's a cat.
There's
a
a
cat
cat
on the ship.
There's a cat on the ship, and every time I waved and I went, hi.
Hi, little guy.
He didn't once say hi back. Anyway, yeah, there's a cat on the ship, and I will say, because I knew Ripley was going to survive, because I know this franchise.
Sure.
Didn't know if the cat survived.
Yeah, you seemed real tense about the cat.
That was what I was most invested in, was like, is this cat going to survive? I was going to be so sad.
I think, most of our friends watching it were like, if the cat dies, I riot.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to lose my mind, because there was lots of cats lovers there that night. So we find Jonesy the cat, and he hisses at them, and there's a false jump scare, and he runs off.
Yep.
And
they send Brett to go find him.
they're like, hey, Brett, because Parker's like, why didn't you catch him? He's like, it's a cat, man.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, but now, it's going to keep throwing off our sensor. Like, we have to catch it so we're not picking it up all the time.
Yeah.
So he goes off to find the cat. And he keeps going. He's like, here, kitty, 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 kitty. Here, kitty, kitty, kitty. And then what does he say?
He says, screw that, or
he's like, screw
that.
this kitty crap.
Yeah, and then he's like, Jones?
Just calls him by
his name.
Jonesy. And he wanders through the ship. And what's really interesting about, the Nostromo that I like a lot, particularly in this scene, and it comes into play later, but the set was built interconnected. So the hallways lead to the cafeteria leads to the med bay, everything was connected, and there was only one entrance to get into the set. So you had to walk through the entire ship if you wanted to get off set while you were filming, which added it added to that kind of floatiness of the camera that could just seamlessly go from room to room. But also the cast talked about how it felt very like when you were on set, you were on the Nostromo for 8 hours that day, and then everybody had to file out the same direction to exit back into the real world.
Yeah, wow.
And they just said that that helped a ton with the immersion of it all.
Yeah.
So he's going through all these rooms in the ship that I couldn't tell you. They look like they have some sort of technical meaning, but he ends up in a room with just dangling chains and dripping water.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's maybe
condensation and water,
right? Like condensation from the engines or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's some explanation, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it just looks cool.
Yeah.
That's why it's there. And you've got all these dangling chains up in the air, and he finds the cat, and Jones is looking past him at something else.
Well, but before that, he finds the skin.
Thank you. Yeah.
Of the little guy.
Yeah. He just finds this thing, this
husk,
shed skin of the
skin.
little dude, and he's like, ugh.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah.
It's gross. Which I'm pretty sure was just made out of condoms and goo, basically.
Well, that'd be fair.
Yeah. So he finds the cat, and the cat is very upset about something. The cat is on edge and is hissing, and he doesn't know why. And then behind him, you just see this mass drop behind him. And again, you don't really get a good look at it.
No.
You see that happen. He realizes something's behind him, and he turns around, and you get a shadow on his face. And then you just get the mouths.
Yeah.
And then one of them shoots forward. You see a splat of blood. He screams. And I think there's one shot of it pinning him down to the ground for half a second. Yeah. And then he goes, it goes up.
Yeah.
Because the cat watches it disappear into the rafters of the chains or whatever. Yeah. Cut back to the rest of the crew who it's implied have found the remains of what happened to him, which is in a deleted scene.
Yeah.
But Parker's it tore him to shreds. This thing is huge. It's the size of a man.
Yeah.
And this was a few hours ago. It was this tiny little thing.
Yeah.
And so they're asking Ash, what's going on? And he's like, I don't know, accelerated growth, is evolution. I don't know.
Yeah.
But things are getting very, very tense, and they don't know what to do about it. And everybody looks to Dallas as the captain to have a plan.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, Parker, can you rig me up a flamethrower?
Yeah.
Because he asks Ash, he's like, is there anything we can do to fight against this thing? And he's like, changes in temperature, maybe. Yeah. He's like, most animals retreat from fire if we can do something with that. So he's like, cool, Parker, make me a flamethrower, and I'm fairly certain that it's traveling through the air ducts, because that's where it took him up. And so they're like, okay, we're not finding it down here. It's probably traveling that way. So we're going to go block by block and just check it off and then seal it up until we corner the thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, who's going in?
Yeah.
And Dallas is like, I guess I'll go. He goes to go talk to him. Well, first, I think Ripley gets angry at him. He's like, this is stupid. What are you doing? And he's like, we have to do something. He goes and talks with Mother, and he asks Mother, he's like, what do I do? And Mother's like, does not compute, doesn't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And it finally ends the scene with, what are my chances? And it just says, does not compute.
Yeah.
And it's just like, okay. So then he goes into the airlocks, which I think is the tensest moment in the movie. It's really good. He goes into the airlocks, and you've got, everything else has been so, one of our friends pointed this out, and I'd noticed it before, but not in the way that like she mentioned that I liked a lot, of like, everything else about the Nostromo is very angular and square and like geometric. And when you're in air ducts, the air ducts are closed with these like concentric sphincters of like metal that are circular, and they
An iris.
Yeah, they iris up. And it feels almost organic the way they open and close in a weird way.
Yeah.
That just makes it just feels off.
Yeah.
So Dallas is in this really crowded, claustrophobic space. He's hunched over this flamethrower. They've got like souped up versions of their little motion detectors that are like scanning the whole ship. And they're like, okay, giving him directions of where it's closest or whatever. And he's getting more and more nervous. They're getting more and more nervous until finally they're like, it's coming towards you. And the vents are built in a way that like they both move horizontally as well as vertically. There's like layers.
Yeah.
So he's like, well, is it above me or below me? Like, we don't know. It's just coming towards you.
Yeah.
And so he's freaking out. They're freaking out. He's like, get me the hell out of here. He, it's building and building and building. He goes down a level thinking that he's beat it. And then he's got his little flashlight and he turns around and the alien goes, ha!
Yeah,
it screams. Yeah, and then it cuts to static.
Yeah.
And they're, Dallas, are you there, Dallas? And he's gone. And they're like, well, crap. And now everything is falling apart. Everything is just bad. And so they're trying to figure out what to do. Ripley starts having to, like, take ownership and take control because nobody else is going to. She asks Ash for help. And Ash she's like, have you and Mother, like, come to any conclusion? He's like, well, we're still collating.
Yeah.
And she kind of like breaks down a little. She's like, you're what?
Yeah.
And she's like, you're giving me non-answers. You've been giving me non-answers this entire time. Anytime I've asked you about any of this, because there was a scene that I missed where like she talks to him in the med bay and she's like, you broke quarantine. Like, you're the science officer. You should know better than anybody not to do that.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, his excuse, ironically, is basically my humanity got the better of me. Yeah. He's like, I wasn't going to leave him out there to die.
Yeah.
And so she's like, you've been giving me non-answers this whole time. I'll go talk to Mother. I have the authority now that Dallas is gone. Like, I can access Mother myself. Goes and accesses Mother, asks some questions, finds some piece of like directive 1709 or some number. And she's like, okay, override what is directive 1709? And Mother spells it out of, hey, retrieve alien life form, bring it back, crew is expendable.
Yeah.
And she's like, okay, the company was screwing us over this entire time. Like, this was planned. Mother, it wasn't an accident that we woke up. It wasn't that we were investigating some ping.
Yeah.
They knew this was out here and they made us stop to go get it.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell us. She sits back in the chair and reveals that Ash is sitting in the room next to her. And he's like, it's a perfectly reasonable explanation for all this. She freaks out and gets angry at him, goes to go find Parker and Lambert to be like, Ash sold us out. He's with the company. They want us dead. And he closes her off. He keeps shutting the doors when she tries to get out. And she had previously, like, when they were arguing in Mother's room, she shoves him and he hits his head against the wall.
Yeah.
And so when he comes out, you've got this really tight close-up and just, like, this trickle of white liquid, just milk, coming from, like, the side of his head. And you're like, what is that? And then before you have time to register it, he reaches out for Ripley, grabs a chunk of her hair and pulls it out of her head.
Yeah.
Just like very aggressive.
Well, and then he throws
movement.
her around a lot. And then
knocks her unconscious. Tries to smother her with a rolled up magazine, which again, like they talked about of it's in like Parker's quarters and there's a bunch of like nude photos on the wall and he picks up like a porno magazine and is shoving it down his throat. And Ridley Scott has talked about, he's like, that scene for him, he's like, do androids get sexual urges? Yeah. And like his observation of the alien being this thing that like penetrates and impregnates and all these things, he's like rolling up the newspaper and trying to shove it down her throat is him emblemating the alien and what it did to Kane, right? Because he's an android and doesn't understand that. There's just interesting ideas going on.
It's really awful.
It's really awful. It's
like
really...
You're having a lot of fun talking about this, Parker, and it's really awful, actually. He's being really mean.
He's being really mean.
He's being awful.
Disclaimer, anytime a character does something bad in a movie and we talk about it, believe it or not, we're not endorsing the character.
Yeah, Parker is, but
I am.
No.
Oh, yeah.
No, we're not.
But he tries smothering Ripley, and this is when Parker and Lambert come back, and Parker's trying to throw him off, which again is one of those things that, like, you know something is wrong because Parker's a big guy and Ash is, Ian Holm. He's tiny, but he's not budging. He can't move him. Ash reaches behind him and, like, grabs Parker's chest, and there's, like, a crunching sound.
Yeah, bad.
And it's just, Parker screams out in pain. Parker grabs a baseball bat, gets him off of Ripley, and then swings at his head, and his head comes clean off.
Well, not quite.
Not quite.
The shoulders rip up, and it's like opening a lid on a can.
Yeah.
Like one of those old opening a lid on a can, and it just kind of like...
Yeah,
and
just kind of...
His shoulders and head are just at a completely, like, different angle.
But he's still moving.
He's still moving. He's flailing around. And milk's coming out.
Yeah, milk is spewing
just milk
everywhere.
spewing out of a dude. You ever seen it?
Yeah.
No.
Parker beats him down, then has that ADR line. He's robot.
He's an android.
Ash is a android. Ash is a goddamn robot.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. So they're all freaking out. Ripley explains off screen what's happening and what's going on with the company. Parker and Lambert are obviously upset about this, and she says, wait a minute, Parker, can you hook him back up? Can you turn Ash back on? He's like, why? Why would we do that? She's like, he knows what's going on. He understands the alien better than we do.
Yeah.
So they plug him back in, and they do. It's a fun effect. It's obviously just a hole cut in the table for Ian Holm's head while his fake body's off to the other direction. But it's fun. He's just covered
in milk.
In milk, and, like, frosting is, like, caked onto his face.
And he's, like, spewing up milk.
He wakes up, and then he closes his mouth and just spews milk.
Bad.
It's bad. It's gross.
Yuck.
Do a fun thing to his voice.
Had a few yucks at this point. Yeah. Do a fun little filter on his voice.
Mm-hmm. So they ask him, what is it we're up against? And he's like, it's the perfect organism.
Yeah.
He's like, its hostility is only matched by its will to survive and its adaptability.
Yeah.
Like, you aren't making it out of this, essentially. Yeah. And he has some cold line of, like, I can't lie to you about your chances, but you do have my sympathy or something. And she gets pissed and unplugs him and yanks him out. And there's a very silly Ian Holm dummy head.
Yeah, it's good.
It's good. But this is when they are like, what are we going to do? What's the plan? Ripley further takes control and says, okay, we're going to grab as much fuel as we can, make it to the lifeboat, the little smaller ship, and we're going to self-destruct. Yeah. We're going to blow up the Nostromo. And they establish very clearly that they're like, okay, we have 10 minutes once this thing starts to when it blows. So we need to get you two go get fuel. I'll go initiate this starting to go off. And so they do. They split up. And Ripley is working on getting this all set and prepped when over the intercom, because they have all the channels open so they can talk to each other, she hears Jonesy meowing, and she's like, I can't leave the cat.
No.
I have to go get the cat.
Yeah.
So she goes looking for the cat. Meanwhile, Parker and Lambert are getting the fuel. And while this is happening, eventually Ripley finds Jonesy, and about that same time, the alien shows up. And again...
With Lambert and Parker.
With Lambert and Parker, yes.
Yeah.
And just, again, showing it in pieces. The first thing we see is its shadow behind Lambert, and Lambert turns and sees it. We get a couple of shots. You hear over the intercom Parker telling Lambert to get out of the way so he can flamethrow it. Yeah. And Lambert can't move. Yeah. She's just petrified.
It's scary.
It's scary. Ripley's hearing all of this and is asking him what's going on. They can't reply because they're in the middle of this. And you get, like, your first real kind of looks at the alien. Like, at this point, it, like, rises into shot, and you see it from, like, the waist up.
Yep.
You see its very long, again, very deliberate, like, penis-shaped head.
Yeah.
And the torso. It does, like, this weird kind of, like, swimming motion with its hands, which in the moment is very creepy.
It's very creepy. Yeah.
Out of context, it's very silly. Like a lot of this.
Doing a little dance.
He's doing a little dance.
Yeah, but it's
Make
very
a little
creepy.
love.
Yeah,
Get down tonight.
Yeah, get down tonight.
Parker goes to, like, bludgeon it, and the tail whips out and knocks him to the ground.
Yep.
And he pins him to the wall, and you get to see, again, the second mouth coming out.
Yeah.
With just, like, I imagine that they're just like off-screen pouring Vaseline down this thing because he's so drippy,
It's so drippy
and
and
moist
glistening,
and glistening. Again, you get like one of those like split-second shots of the mouth like going into flesh.
Yeah.
He screams out. And then poor Lambert just gets like there's awful things insinuated about what happens to Lambert.
It's bad. Yeah. That's
just like the tail.
Yep.
And again, they don't go past that. You just hear her screams, and you're just like, yike. Okay, don't like that. Ripley is hauling ass down the hallways with her little cat carrier at this point, trying to get back to like the front.
She also tries to get to them, doesn't she?
I think she does. Yeah, she rushes there and finds.
And they're bleeding. They're hanging from the ceiling. That sort of thing.
Yeah, and she's like, "Oh my god, it's just me."
Which is then when she runs with Jonesy to the escape. So she sets up the explosion, rushes to the escape thing.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. I couldn't remember if she set it up after or if this was running at the time. Yeah, so she's already started the countdown. She sees that they're dead, tries to make it to the escape, and comes around the corner and the alien's standing in the hallway leading to the escape pod. She throws herself against the wall, drops Jonesy, and realizes the ship's gonna blow up and I can't get to the escape pod.
Yeah.
So she runs back and leaves Jonesy. And there's this, everybody was screaming.
Yeah.
There's a shot of the alien like leaning down and like looking at the cat in the case, and everybody we're watching with were like, no!
Yeah.
Because we thought the cat was dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very
We
upsetting.
thought Jonesy was dead.
Yeah.
But just wait. There's good news.
Ripley runs back, and it's, the movie cliche of like, she does all the processes to cancel the self-destruct, but she does it like 2 seconds too late.
Too late.
And she can't, after 5 minutes, you cannot cancel it.
Yeah.
And so she's like, Mother, like, turn it off. I did the thing. And Mother replies and says, oh, self-destruct in 5 minutes. And Ripley grabs a box, just, you bitch, and throws something and it blows up. Just nice to see her just get out.
Classic moms. The self-destruct will continue in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Everyone. Whose mom hasn't
said that?
Anyway.
And so she now has 5 minutes, not 10. She has 5 minutes to get back to the other end of the ship, and just hope the alien isn't there or figure out what she's going to do.
Jonesy is still alive.
Jonesy's still alive, and the alien is not there.
The alien's not there. And she goes, great, this is the easiest ending to a movie ever.
Yep. She grabs him. The ship starts blowing up, and like as she's going, she keeps like stopping to like flamethrow behind her to be like, it's not following me.
Yeah.
She gets into the ship, countdown's happening, shoots off, and then
it explodes like 3 times.
Yeah, just the craziest.
Just over and over, just the same effect. Mm-hmm. Blows up 3 times. She says, I got you, you son of a bitch.
Yeah.
Which I was like, Because at this point I was like, it's really anticlimactic killing of the alien.
Yeah.
And I went, so I think the alien's still alive. But I was like, but she said the line.
It feels like the end of the movie.
It's the famous line, but also especially in 2023.
Yeah.
That's the line that people quote from Alien, right? Because Aliens has others, But Alien, it's like, I got you. And I was like, surely the alien is dead now. But I went, but my heart tells me that is not the case. No. And surely it isn't.
It is not. She puts Jones in the little sleeper pod.
He has a little sleep pod for himself.
He has a sleep pod for himself.
Which is perfect.
It's great. It's lovely. Puts him in the sleep pod, and...
I took a breath because the cat was safe.
Yes. And she starts getting ready for her own sleep pod. So she takes off all of her, her worker jumpsuit, and she's just in, a tank top and underwear. And... it's an effective jump scare because she goes to a wall.
And there's pipes.
There's pipes. There's all
shiny,
sorts of stuff.
They're kind of a sheeny pipe. And then one of them moves.
It reaches out.
Right, the hand reaches out, but then it's revealed that one of the pipes is just the head of the alien.
Yep.
Which is funny because I remember what I saw. I was like, it's one thing I hate about this is that so many of these pipes look like the alien. I was like, that's really awful.
I think you said that 2 minutes before.
And then the pipe moved, and I went, oh god, it is the alien. I was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So she.
The alien's sleeping.
Yeah, he's real tired.
He's tired.
Worn out.
He did some big stuff today.
Big stuff. Killed a lot of people, and so he's very kind of comatose.
Yeah.
He reached out because something happened, and he kind of goes back to sleep.
Yeah, he's like,
So she
5 more minutes.
She rushes into the supply closet, puts on the astronaut outfit, and gets a little harpoon gun.
Yep.
And she sits down in a chair, and it's a fun little detail. It doesn't make much sense in context of the world, but I like it. That to soothe herself, she starts singing "You Are My Lucky Star" from Singing in the Rain.
Yeah.
And it's just really nervous and shaking the whole time.
Yeah.
She straps herself in very quietly to the chair, and she starts pressing buttons. And as she does, like, these shoots of steam come out of the pipes, and she's like getting closer and closer to where the alien is. She finds where the alien is, shoots it with steam. It starts to scream and is like flailing around.
And it comes out.
It starts coming out, and she turns her chair the other way to bait it.
Yeah.
And so she's just sitting there like shaking. You are.
Yep.
And it's getting, you're going closer and closer and closer on this close up. She like turns her head in the helmet, and you see the double jaws opening right next to her.
Yeah, she
Screams, hits the airlock, and the alien gets sucked out towards the door, but it catches itself in the doorway. She grabs the harpoon gun, shoots it, and shoots it out.
Right.
The door closes, the harpoon gun gets stuck on the other side, so the alien is now tethered to the outside of the spaceship and is bouncing around for a minute. He looks kind of silly. But then his tail wraps around like one of the exhaust ports, and it looks like he's going to crawl his way back into the ship. And you're like, oh God, it's not over. And she slams the thrusters and just burns him to a crisp.
Yeah.
And
he flies away.
In a very interesting effect that they're like pouring water on the lens. Did you notice
yeah,
that? It's
yeah,
weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that is the proper
That is
end.
Alien.
She got it. She leaves a little captain's log, tells them everybody else is dead. I'm drifting. With any luck, I'll reach the frontier in like 16 weeks.
Yep.
And maybe somebody will pick me up.
Yep.
We learn from the sequels that doesn't happen, unfortunately.
I didn't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. She's out there a lot longer than 16 weeks.
Oh. But surely she makes it home. Oh no! Anyway.
But that's Alien.
That's Alien.
Yeah.
No other thoughts.
No, oh man, good movie. I just like I think what I love about it as a horror movie is that it just all of the scares work for me. Mm-hmm. And they ratchet up the tension so gradually that by the end, like, that fever pitch of just running down the halls, like, real shaky cam stuff going on. You pointed out, too, I forgot to mention, when they're out on the surface of the planet,
and they're approaching the planet, you get feed.
You get, like, video feed from their helmets. It's, like, very early found footage kind of stuff.
It's, like, feels very found footage, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, very, like, Paranormal Activity, which is fun.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I really love how well paced this thing is. There's a director's cut of the film that tightens up the first act a little bit and adds some stuff in later. And most people, like, they're pretty comparable. There's not a whole lot of differences. Most people prefer the theatrical cut.
Yeah.
Well,
and Ridley Scott's come out and said, like, they just made me do that for the DVD release or whatever. He's like, the theatrical cut's my cut.
Yeah.
Right? Is that what you said? Mm-hmm. Okay. I don't do any research. I'm just repeating things that Parker has said before that he didn't say that time, which makes me look like I know what I'm talking about.
You always know what you're talking about. Yeah, so is there, because I give this a 5-star. I really like this movie. I think you gave it 4.5.
I don't know why.
Okay, I was just curious to know if there was... It's fine.
There's nothing wrong with it.
That's okay.
It's not like I'm like, there's one thing. I was just like, 4.5.
Sure, that's fine.
Pretty great movie.
One of my favorite movies of the last year is Puss in Boots, and I've watched it 8 times, and it cannot crack the 5 for some reason.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you why.
Yeah, better than Citizen Kane.
Yep. Historically speaking, we agreed. But yeah, I was just curious to ask you about that, see if there was anything. No?
Just good movie.
Good movie.
That's all.
Great.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have anything else.
That's okay. That's okay. Criteria then?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to start us off?
Sure. Historical and technical. I can't start with this one. What historical and technical relevance, Parker? What did it do?
I mean, this was a huge boom for like sci-fi horror specifically. This is like one of the first of that specific subgenre.
Started a franchise.
Hugely influential alien design.
Yep. Pop culture icon. Mm-hmm. Ripley and the alien, I would say.
I know that like specifically the Borg in like Star Trek Next Generation pulls a lot from like Geiger influences.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't know. Like it echoes through a lot.
Yeah.
And there's hugely iconic stuff. Like the chestburster's been parodied a million times under the sun, including a really good one in Spaceballs with John Hurt himself.
This is good. Yeah.
But
I think I'm going to give it a Citizen Kane.
Yeah, it feels that way. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, I just feel like Citizen Kane takes that for reasons we've talked about for 19 episodes.
Ad nauseum for 10 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think this is a hugely influential science fiction film, but I do think that like they're not trailblazing filmmaking in any particular ways. They're trailblazing genre.
They're making a good
ways.
movie that like you said, trailblazed genre. But
Yeah.
I wouldn't say it, trailblazed cinema or filmmaking overall.
I think that's fine. I'm fine with giving that to Kane.
Kane. Oh. Wow.
How well is this doing what it's trying to do?
Really well. And you?
Wow, you're killing it. You've got so much to add to this later half.
It's really it's good. What do you want me to say? Sorry if that blew out the mic. Sorry.
You're fine.
It's really good, Parker.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a flaw in it. Do you, Mr. 5 Stars? Do you think there's a single flaw in what it's trying to do?
No, I do not.
Is there anything you think it could have done better?
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. For the time, for what it's trying to do, what it accomplishes in its final form, I think it kills it.
The only thing that like I sort of caught on was I was like, well, maybe just make Lambert more of an interesting character than just screaming, but like that's such a minor thing, and also like that's kind of the role she fills in like the crew dynamic. Like you need somebody being more hysterical than other people.
Yeah.
Sucks that it happens to be the only other woman on the crew.
Yeah.
But like,
I
don't know. That's me really trying to nitpick.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I think this is, again, if the log line of the screenwriter was truckers in space in a haunted house, I think it nails it. I think it's really good at that.
Is there a version of this story on Earth where some truckers stop at a haunted house and they just, like, could you make Alien on Earth and just call it Ghost? Or something? Well, you can't call it that, but
oh no, it would be a moving company literally taking a mansion across the country. Like they would load it on a trailer and they'd be traveling with this thing.
Yeah.
But even then, like, because the point of what makes this work is that there is nowhere to go.
Right.
So it's like, I don't know, they just get out of the truck and run into the desert.
Then I guess it would be a ship.
Yeah, it would have to be.
It would be a ship on the sea.
Yeah, looking at you, last voyage of the Demeter.
I was going to say, I guess it would just be, all right.
Could have been so much better.
That's on you for getting hopes up for last voyage of the Demeter.
Look, Dracula on a boat. Dracula boating.
Yeah.
Come on.
That's true. You know what? Yeah, you're not immune to that.
Yes. To your point, it would have to take place on the ocean for that same reason.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. So
I was just curious.
Yeah, I'd give the point to Alien.
Okay.
How well, like, how much are you connecting with this personally? How well is this working for you as a viewer?
It worked really well. I was very scared. I was very tense. Obviously, as someone who has the hindsight of 40 plus years, I'm like, cool, Ripley's the main character.
Yeah.
I know that. And I know that she survives. She doesn't die until later. And then she's resurrected.
Yeah.
You might say. One might say. So, like, but that, it's like, but it still absolutely worked for me. I was afraid. I was looking away. I did my glasses trick. Even though I'd seen the chest burster before.
Yeah.
So I think it absolutely did exactly what it wanted me to feel.
Nice. About the same, I'd say. I think it works really well. Like, I connect with it, and I have such a fun time watching it every single time. Yeah. And, like, to your point, given the hindsight and given, like, because even when I watched this, I knew Ripley was the main character. Because that's just, again, like movies, you hear about these things.
One of the greatest cinema icons of all time, genre filmmaking.
Right. And so I wonder, we were talking about this when we watched the movie, like, how much more intense and wild was this movie when you knew nothing? Like, if you're an audience member in 79 and the chest burster scene happens and you have no clue that it's coming. Yeah. Like, how much more effective is that,
If you don't know what the alien looks like, if you don't,
Right, and if you're watching people get picked off and it's Sigourney Weaver left.
Yeah.
And you're like,
who?
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. There's, like, a layer of that I wish I could experience blind that I won't be able to, and that's okay. But I just, like, it's a testament to the movie that even knowing all of that stuff, it still works so well.
Yeah. Do you get scared still watching this?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's still, they're like, even knowing.
You still get tense.
I still get tense. Yeah. Like, I know where the jump scares are, and those rarely get me. But every once in a while, like, the specific timing, Like the one in the vent still gets me because I never know exactly when he turns around.
Yeah.
But I am tense throughout the whole thing, and like that was another thing that was fun watching it with a group of people who hadn't seen it. Was just observing, not even the scary moments like the big jump scares, of just how tense everybody was watching it.
I didn't relax until the alien was dead. Yeah. So great job.
Great job. Did it.
Great job, everybody.
Okay, so Criteria says this is better than Citizen Kane.
Is it?
Objectively, is it?
Probably. I don't know. What do you think?
I think so. It's this one's tough because like there is such a distinct divide between genre filmmaking, specifically horror.
Yes.
And like what Kane is trying to do.
It's probably the reason that like, I mean, also just like prudeness, but it's probably the reason that like Academy Awards tend not to include horror movies.
Right.
Because it's like, well, that, that's different.
Yeah, it's hard. Again, like it's tough to compare the two.
Yeah.
And even like us talking about like, well, which one does what it's trying to do better? It's like, I don't know, they're doing completely different things.
Yeah.
In a way that not even some of the other stuff we've looked at. Like horror just feels so far removed from like what Kane is trying to do as a drama.
Yeah.
But I do think like on a technical level, on an audience enjoyment level, on like a longevity level, like coming back to like glancing at our criteria, but looking at the broader picture, I think it is a better movie than Citizen Kane is. I think it's more engaging. I think it's better paced. Granted, a lot of that has to do with modern bias.
Yeah, and also what you're interested in.
And what I'm interested in, naturally.
Weirdly, Parker's favorite horror movie of all time, guy who likes horror movies, he thinks is better than Citizen Kane, a movie he goes, all right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. I think it's good to mention those points of like, obviously, we might be biased towards Alien. I think, because like obviously there's a tendency for me to go, for some reason I'm the one who's always like, maybe it's Citizen, hasn't watched it since January. I mean, thinking about it, Alien is coming out in 79, and it is, I mean, it's just got really great design work. Like, you just look at each chunk of it, right?
Yeah.
What was the score like? Was there a score for Alien?
Yeah, there's a score for Alien.
I don't remember it super well.
It's just very atmospheric.
Sure.
It's very just kind of like punchy to the moments, but it's not Jaws.
Yeah. No. It doesn't need to be.
Sure.
Nothing needs to be Jaws. I don't know. It just feels really well put together. Like you said, it's a script that was destined to be a B movie, and yet it became elevated.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Probably.
I think so.
Let's say it is.
Let's say it is. We're putting the stamp.
Because again, it doesn't really matter. You can say or think whatever you want.
Hey, believe it or not, film?
Subjective
shit.
as hell.
Yeah.
So Alien is
better than Citizen Kane.
Great.
Officially. We did it,
Good.
folks.
Glad we knocked that one out of the way.
Max is like, thank God. I don't have to hear about this anymore.
Yeah, never talk to me about Alien again.
Okay, cool.
No. I liked it. It was good, and I'll watch Aliens at some point.
Say it again.
I liked Alien.
Right, great.
And I'll watch Aliens. A movie that Parker also kind of likes.
I like Aliens.
I know.
That's a 4.5
really
for me.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
And I'm going to give it 5, just to be contrary. No. Parker, what's next week? What's next time?
Next time, I'm so excited.
It's coming out on the 30th, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
The day before Halloween. We are watching Vincent Price in House on Haunted Hill.
Classic.
I'm so... This was like... We'll talk about it more in the episode.
Yeah.
But the little preview I'll give audiences right now is that, like, this was a huge bonding moment for us. When we both were like, you've seen that movie? And you like that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's good. We're excited to talk about it. Fun movie.
Silly movie.
Silly movie.
And we're talking about it.
On Better Than Citizen Kane.
Wondering whether it's better than Citizen... All right. We'll save that for next time.
We'll save it next time.
See y'all later.
Thanks, everyone.
Be safe out there. Take care of yourself. Be kind.
Bye.